guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Intuitive Angling, and thanks for joining me for today's episode. I really appreciate you guys coming by the channel. And guys, today I want to talk about some new behaviors that I've been witnessing in bass over the past couple of years. This is a departure from all of the other years that I've bass fished out there. I have seen a noticeable change in the behavior of bass, just unique to a point where I've never thought that I'd see it this quick. And I really want to discuss what that is in today's video and maybe give you guys some tips and advice on how to deal with that as far as catching more fish through these changes that bass are evolving through right now. So we're going to get into that in today's episode. Also, guys, before we get started, a couple quick housekeeping tips here. I'd just like to invite everybody, if you haven't had a chance, to please swing by and check out my Fish the Moment lake map breakdowns up on the fishthemoment.com website. We got our winter maps that I built for Fish the Moment up on the site right now. Guys, these are great deals as far as to get you some good fishing places on your favorite lake. It gives you guys GPS waypoints. You can go straight to spots to fish with tips and advice on how to fish each one of those lake locations that I've identified these spots myself. And you can duplicate it around the lake once you learn that and learn a little bit about the lake. So I'll have the Fish the Moment lake map breakdown link in the description of the video here. And also, guys, anybody interested in booking an on-the-water lesson with me, we're doing a lot of on-the-water jerkbait lessons now. So if you'd like to get some good information and learn how to fish a jerkbait better, shoot me a private message on my Facebook page, Randy Blaukat Professional Angler, and I'll get you all the details for that. Okay, one of the things that, you know, I'm sort of defensive a little bit about is a lot of people, in the videos I do, when I talk about bass behavior, they sort of like demean bass, and they make them sound like they're little stupid pea-brain creatures that all they do is, all they know how to do is eat, and they're so stupid they can't do anything else. Guys, bass are brilliant, and they are adaptive, and they have been on this planet longer than human beings have. You know, human beings have only been on this planet in the form we know now for 1 million years or so, and the largemouth bass lineage can be tracked back to 3.5 million years ago. So for a species to survive on this planet with all the changes and the adaptations they have to make for over 3 million years, that is a genius species, and it needs to be respected as such. And we're seeing these changes right now as far as their adaptive abilities to the new challenges they have more than ever. So I've identified here 4 or 5 I want to talk about here as far as what I have seen, the changes in the behaviors of the bass we're going to get into. Now, the first one is the schooling activity of a bass. If you got a lot of you guys that have not been around fishing that long, you have never seen or experienced what is called a mega school of bass. Now, a mega school of bass is just what it sounds like. It is a gigantic school of bass. And these were common, very common, years ago before people really understood and knew much about fishing offshore. And that's why, David Fritz, back in the early 90s, was one of the first anglers that were able to tap into these mega schools by triangulation and using paper maps and a flasher to find these big schools of offshore bass. And there'd be hundreds of fish in it sometimes. One of the biggest changes I've noticed over the past few years is you don't see mega schools anymore. Mega schools have been reduced to isolated wolf packs of fish. So in other words, let's say, for example, if you go back 30, 40 years ago at Kentucky Lake, and you got out on Kentucky Lake on one of those creek channel, river channel intersections where like a little ditch entered the main river, before anybody knew or could figure out how to get to those spots or find those spots to even fish way out offshore, there were these gigantic schools of bass out there where there were hundreds of fish, and you catch fish every cast for an hour on them. Those schools don't exist anymore. They've been broken up. Like I said, fish now live in singles, little wolf packs, 2s and 3 packs. Maybe occasionally you'll get a bigger school, but those days of those mega schools are gone. And bass probably have realized out of some survival mechanism that they can't school up like that, or the fish just simply aren't there in those amounts that they used to be. Okay, the next thing that I've noticed as far as bass behavior is they've really gotten good very quickly at sonar avoidance. That is one of the major things in bass fishing, and I've seen this even before the cheater box came along, as far as using like flashers and 2-dimensional sonar in shallow water. One of the things that I've always, felt is if you're fishing, like you're flipping and pitching lay down trees or bushes or whatever, and you don't really need to know how deep the water is, I always turn my electronics off, because that electronic ping, you can notice the difference as far as the amount of fish you catch. And you have to understand, it's like, noise travels and is amplified so much underwater. So these electronic pings just off of one boat is extremely loud in the water. And you can imagine now, where there's more boats on the water than there's been ever before, and everybody's got 4 and 5 and 6 electronic units on their boat, the number and the noise decibel level of these pings on days where there's just a lot of people out there fishing. So bass have evolved to, when they see that, and when they experience that, they get inactive the same way that they get inactive like if a bad cold front comes through. It's a survival mechanism that they've adapted to. And it's another one of those things, the evolutionary process is constantly going on with all species, but we've seen the bass evolve so quick as a survival mechanism, and this is one of the things that, they've been really sensitive of as far as these electronic pings. Okay, the next one is we've seen a huge shift in lure education of the bass, as far as how they get educated very quickly and wise up to certain lures. And the analogy I use all the time, guys, a lot of you guys have heard me talk about this, but it's a perfect analogy, is the old hellbender. A lot of you guys say, oh, Grandy, not the hellbender again, but this is a perfect thing what I'm talking about. See this hellbender here? Rudimentary metal lure, whopper stopper hellbender. Guys, back in the 1970s, I cannot tell you how many 7 to 9 pound bass I saw caught on this, not only at Grand Lake in Oklahoma, but Table Rock, Bull Shoals Lake, a bunch of big ones. Guys, if you'd put this on right now and you go down to Table Rock or Bull Shoals Lake and you threw it, you probably wouldn't catch a fish in a week on it. Now, here's the thing about it, how bass, wise up to lure education and how they get educated to lures, is a bass has not seen this hellbender or there's been generations of bass in lakes across the country that have never seen a hellbender, yet they still won't bite it even though they haven't seen it. So there's a difference between bass evolving on a biological cellular level versus just getting educated to a certain lure. Because if they get educated to seeing like the same white and chartreuse spinnerbait coming across a log time after time after time, yeah, they might get educated to it. But when you're talking about a bait like a hellbender or a bomber or a lazy Ike that the fish don't see, but they still won't bite it, then you have a completely different conversation. Because what has happened is, since the bass in 2025 will not bite a hellbender, but they bit the thing, they tore the paint off it back in 1975, you have to conclude, the logical conclusion to this is that they have evolved on a deeper level. There's been an awareness, like an instinctual, primal awareness that has evolved with them on some type of a level that we don't even understand, to avoid baits like the hellbender. It's not that they've seen the hellbender, because they haven't seen the hellbender. You can't even find them anymore. They're like impossible to even get. Nevertheless, they won't bite it. So this lure education and what we've seen and the evolution of the bass, it all goes to more realistic, natural looking stuff with different type of frequencies and noise and vibrations and water displacement and wobbles and paint schemes. It's like the bass they've wised up to getting fooled by rudimentary actions and rudimentary colors. And it's not something that they're just remembering. This is nothing that a bass remembers as far as a hellbender. It's something that is sort of like evolved on some type of it's just some type of a primal, instinctual, almost the spiritual level that they've evolved for. And then finally, guys, there's what I call pressure-related changes that the bass have made. Now, one of the biggest things that I know for sure in bass fishing is the amount or the degree of activity or aggressiveness that a bass shows based upon different type of variables. A lot of people, and the way it was in the past, is the behavior of a bass. A lot of it would have to do with the weather conditions, like the barometric pressure, the direction of the wind, the humidity in the air, the light intensity, the wind speed, And now that does have a big impact on it. Don't get me wrong, it still does today. But what we have seen is we've seen bass evolve to react and behave the same that they do with weather patterns with fishing pressure now. Because let's say, for example, you have you're out there fishing and it's, April and it's, 75 degrees and it's overcast and you got a little bit of wind and the fish are super active, low light conditions, warm water, shallow fish, and they're super active. And then the next day you got this, say a massive Arctic cold front rolls in and the temperatures drop 30 degrees and the wind switches out to the north and it blows 20 miles an hour to the north and it's bright bluebird sky and the fish shut down. They shut down because of a lot of different environmental conditions and the food chain sort of shuts down, and people relate that to the weather pattern, which is true, but the same is also can be said with increased fishing pressure and increased noise levels on a lake. Now, we talked about the noise decibels from electronics, that's one, but let's say, for example, you're out there on a weekend on your favorite lake and there's 2 or 3 tournaments going on, you've got 500 boats running around and you got the outboard exhaust, you got trolling motors flopping in the water, you got trolling motors whirling around, you got dudes out on a jet ski, you got some families out in pontoon boats pulling inner tubes behind the boat. You got these unbelievable noise decibels, and this type of pressure, this type of increased decibel pressure acts in the same way that the negative weather patterns act. So before, the only thing you had to deal with was weather patterns, and now you have to deal with weather patterns in correlation with the amount of pressure and activity and noise levels on the lake. That's why bass usually always bite better during the week, and that is simply because the noise level decibels are less. So from my standpoint, I think that bass have evolved to a point where they know if the noise decibel levels increase on a lake, they get inactive as a survival mechanism. And this is one of the things that have kept them on this planet for over 3 million years, is the ability to quickly do that. And that's just a byproduct that we're seeing, guys, from fishing pressure. And that's one of the things that needs to be talked a lot more about, because fishing pressure is completely changed the sport, and it will continue to change that sport in a negative way. It just makes it tougher for everybody out there. And we've talked about things that can be done about that, but ultimately we have a lot of apathy amongst people in this industry that are in positions of power that can make changes that don't want to do that. So anyway, guys, that's just a few changes I've observed in bass myself. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll check in later.